On today's episode of the Football Fellowship podcast, it was another action-packed weekend in the Premier League. We'll be looking at all the stats, all the tactics, and breaking down all of the weekend's action, including Arsenal's much-needed and almost bottled North London derby victory over their neighbours Spurs. Liverpool all but bowing out on the title race after dropping more points away at West Ham, and lots of action at the other end of the table too. Luton and Forest didn't pick up any points this weekend, whilst Burnley got a massive draw away at Old Trafford to scrape their way back into it and try and stay in the Prem next season. All of that and more to come, including more rounds of the Football Fellowship quiz, some more rounds of Football Tenable for you to play along at home as mine and my co-host Mev's season comes to an end in the quiz as well.
And of all the Premier League derbies this season that we have covered, we've got the Merseyside derby, you've got the Manchester derby, but the North London derby, further neutral, absolutely does not disappoint. Box office entertainment every single time. And for Toby, for you coming into this game, you must have been really positive. You must have been really on a high, especially after that midweek 5-0 drubbing of Chelsea. And then to find yourselves 3-0 up at halftime against your bitter rival Spurs, you must have been in absolute dreamland during this game.
Yeah, it was quite a strange feeling being an Arsenal fan. Obviously, 3-0 up at half-time away at Spurs. Couldn't have asked for much better. I was absolutely ecstatic at half-time. I was so gassed. But it felt a bit strange because I don't think we really played that well in the first half, and I think a 3-0 was very, very harsh on Spurs, and in a strange way, maybe for the first time ever, I felt a little bit sorry for Spurs and Spurs fans in this game. I think that Spurs could have really taken that game and given us a lot more trouble than they did in the first half. But yeah, as you say, as an Arsenal fan, I couldn't really have asked for much more in terms of a scoreline, especially in such a high-pressure game as the North London derby always is. But given the situation that the season is at with Arsenal at the moment, it was tenfold. So yeah, to be 3-0 up at half-time was great, even if it felt a little bit weird.
Yeah, well, I'll try and break it down as best as I can because I struggled to analyse this game. I don't know if you felt the same way because I did feel like Spurs, like you said, were slightly the better team. They had more possession of the ball. They seemed to be creating more chances more fluidly than Arsenal were. Arsenal were defending very deep, but also defending very well, you have to say. So in a weird way, you have to give credit to them for limiting Spurs' chances. But I also thought it was probably a game of quite fine margins. I think Romero has a chance from a corner. I think he beats Odegaard in the air and his header just wide of the post, and then Spurs have a free kick. In fact, I think he gets ahead of Thomas Partey that time, and then his header hits the crossbar. So it is, I can understand what you mean about Arsenal weren't great, but I also think Arsenal do have to take some credit because I don't think they're at their best in the North London derby, but still to be 3-0 up and, to take the chances. I think the word's probably clinical, and I think Arsenal were that, and I don't think Spurs were in that first half.
Yeah, that's a really good phrase, fine margins, I think, for this game especially, and I think that possibly also reflects maybe the differences between the two sides at the moment in terms of where they are and sort of their rebuilds. Arsenal obviously pushing for the title of the season, Spurs rebuilding and trying to get back into that top four as a first step. And I think the way the Arsenal goals came about, maybe how Spurs let those come about, reflects those differences at the moment, and where Arsenal are at a stage where they have been able to work on such small things to improve a lot over the last sort of season. Especially one of those, as we know and as we've talked about so much this season, is Arsenal's set pieces. 2 goals from them in that first half. The first being the Højbjerg own goal, which was a little unlucky, but I think the way Arsenal set it up was really, really good. And the second one being that Kai Havertz header, and having to be in Arsenal in a position where that's something they've really worked on, that's given those extra sort of 5-6 points throughout the season, however many it works up, and Spurs still struggling to defend those and not creating too many chances themselves from those positions, is where, yeah, as you've said, you've got to give Arsenal a lot of credit, as well as that Saka goal, I think, as well. Arsenal were able to break really, really quickly. Spurs' rest defence, sort of the structure they had off the ball, the way they struggled to recover, I think, from that goal, is something that we've seen Arsenal really excel at when they're controlling games. And at that point, I think Spurs were controlling the game, especially in terms of possession. They really could have punished Arsenal, but it only took that one opportunity for Arsenal to break, Havertz to play over the top for Saka, and Saka to finish really, really clinically. And it was just those few little moments in that first half that gave Arsenal what turned out to be such a huge advantage.
Yeah, but I tell you what, I think there's still some, even though Spurs play with the rest defence and they have this mindset and the way of playing that they're always going to be in the front foot and attacking, I still think though you got to take into account individual responsibility, because if you watch that attack back in slow motion, and we'll get on to the penalty shouts for Spurs as well, we're just going to cover Arsenal first, but I think when Havertz plays that ball over the top, Spurs actually have a decent number of players back in the defence. I think the issue I have is with Ben Davies in particular, who came with us for this game for Destiny Odoji, who's unfortunately picked up an injury, might be out of the Euros as well fitly. But I just think his positioning, he's drawn to the ball. If you stop the play, as soon as Kai Havertz makes that pass, the ball leaves his foot. Every single one of the Spurs players is looking at the ball, at Kai Havertz. No one's looking around to see where's the danger, where's this ball going to. And actually, I think Bukayo Saka is in more space than he probably should have to him, because I think if Ben Davies is 5 yards closer, moves over to his right-hand side, closer to Saka, I don't think Havertz even attempts to play the pass, because I think in his head, he'll think, okay, Saka's marked, I'm just going to lose this ball, and then Spurs are going to form another attack. But I think it was far too easy. Even when Saka takes his first touch on that counter, he's in so much space and a better first touch, and he can probably go ahead and take that shot straight away and doesn't even need to cut inside on his left foot, which Ben Davies lets him do. And I think that's the second mistake that Ben Davies makes in that particular move. But I do also want to give credit to Arsenal for that. But yeah, I just want to say that, because I think despite that, I think some of the individual mistakes that Spurs have made have maybe cost them more so than the system. But the system takes a flack because it's a big headline, it's a flashy Spurs tactics aren't working and Portugal is to blame. And in that one particular situation, I don't necessarily think it was, but I think as overall for the season, I think maybe so. But on that break, there were 2 penalty shouts, one on Kulusevski and one on Maddison. What were your thoughts on those two situations?
Yeah, that second one on Maddison, I think it was maybe confirmed sort of after. It looked initially that it could have been, but I think on the replays, everyone seemed to agree that Rice very clearly got the ball. It was a good tackle. Not too many complaints from that one. On the first one, that little Trossard trip on Kulusevski, I think we got a bit lucky with that one. I would have been pretty fuming, I think, if I was in that situation and Arsenal hadn't been given it. It was a definite clip. As I always say, when a player is running, it does not take much for someone to be able to trip. And I think the argument maybe from VAR was that there wasn't enough contact. But for me, if a player is running and they get a clip and it makes him take his legs out, it doesn't matter how much the contact is. It doesn't really take much when you're running at full speed. I don't think there was any intent from Trossard, but I think the fact that he was stepping into Kulusevski's space, you're taking that risk, unfortunately. And I think Spurs had every right to be pretty fuming, I think, with that decision, especially since it led directly to an Arsenal goal as well. What do you reckon?
So yeah, I completely agree on the Maddison one. Definitely not a penalty. If anything, he probably throws himself to the ground and a bit less contact, and I think he probably gets booked for diving. I actually think the Kulusevski one, I'm not sure, because I've yet to actually see an angle where it conclusively looks like Trossard makes a challenge. I do at one point notice Kulusevski with his left boot nick his right calf, and I just put a little bit of doubt in my mind, so I'm not 100% sure, just because I haven't seen a conclusive camera angle which says yes, this part of Trossard hit this part of Kulusevski, it was a trip and it was a foul and a penalty, but I'm not 100% sure. But then if we move on then to the second half, Spurs again think they have a shout for a penalty. This time it was a bit of both. It was Gabriel and it was Thomas Partey getting the ball off Kulusevski in about the 55th minute of the second half. And I think this one they have more of a claim for. I think this is the one which is, for me, most obviously a penalty, just because Thomas Partey gets the ball, but Gabriel also challenges Kulusevski. And I don't know what part of the ball Gabriel gets. And the answer is he doesn't get any part of the ball. But he gets Kulusevski's foot and his thigh. And so for me, I actually think that's a penalty, because Gabriel doesn't touch the ball whatsoever. How did you see that one?
Yeah, I think we completely flipped, because I didn't think that one was a penalty when I first saw it watching the game, and afterwards sort of on review as well. I didn't think it was. I think Gabriel's challenge on Kulusevski, even though maybe he didn't get the ball, I think it made almost no difference to the challenge itself. I think Partey winning the ball is going to cause Kulusevski to lose it and to go down, and I just think Gabriel was just there as well. I don't think his challenge really had any impact on the situation. So yeah, for me that one definitely wasn't we also had the third one as well, which was the penalty that they did eventually get, and I think VAR definitely got that one right. I'm not quite sure how the ref maybe missed it in real time, but I think that one was glad that we definitely got the right result in there, because I don't think there was any complaints from Arsenal fans, and that they ultimately delivered the right decision on that one as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a howler from the referee not to give that in real time. I'm actually glad that was what VAR was for, when the referee makes an on-field error, to go and correct them, and that was a stone rule. He didn't even need to have a look at it for a second time. And I think, at that point, I think it's maybe fair to say that Spurs didn't get themselves back into the game, but Arsenal gave the game away a little bit. I think especially with that first goal as well. I mean, David Raya, got the most clean sheets of any goalkeeper this season with 16, but he was probably hoping for a clean sheet in this game as well, and he absolutely gifted the ball straight to Christian Romero. Interestingly enough, it is Christian Romero who's pressing that high up in the pitch, almost as like a striker, which is quite an interesting observation, I quite thought. But yeah, it was just David Raya having an absolute howler. But thankfully, he did recover in the game pretty well. He made 3 high claims after that point. And it did seem that even at 3-2, I did feel that Arsenal were still in control of the game, just because Spurs weren't creating enough chances. I think David Raya didn't have a single save to make in the whole game, and the 2 times he did try to make a save were the penalty and the goal, so he couldn't really do anything about that. But I'm guessing from your perspective, you were probably a lot more nervous being an Arsenal fan, but for me, I didn't feel like Spurs were ever going to break Arsenal down. Is that how you saw it?
I'm glad you were calm, mate, because honestly, if I was wearing like an Apple Watch or something, I think it would have like called my emergency contacts for my heart rate. I was literally, I was like standing watching it, and I couldn't sit down and watch it because I was so nervous. It just felt like, I think with the atmosphere, with the occasion, really, really felt like Tottenham were going to get that third goal. I was just so nervous watching it. It was horrible. And I think it is in those moments that those sort of cliched things can come in. As you said, I don't think Spurs were amazing in that second half. I think the first 15 minutes of the second half, Arsenal were very, very comfortably in control. They get that goal gifted to them and things completely change. Even though Spurs may have known themselves that they weren't creating much, they had that belief, and with the atmosphere and the fans believing that as well, the game just completely flipped. But there wasn't really much change tactically, in a sense. I think Spurs moved a few players around, which helped them. I think when Son eventually went out to the left and Richarlison was up front, Brennan Johnson also coming out to the right, and Kulusevski moving into the 10, they looked a lot more dangerous in there. And I really like Kulusevski in that 10. I'm not sure if he's like a natural winger. I think he's more sort of a creative midfielder, and I really, really liked him. I think when he was in the 10, it seemed to be dictating the play quite well. And it just felt like it was coming. It felt like it was coming, even though I'm sure as a neutral, you were able to watch the game a little more sort of tactically, as opposed to me just wanting Arsenal to boot the ball out at every opportunity.
Yeah, well, it's quite funny. I probably wanted there to be another goal in the game just for the purpose of entertainment and see how Arsenal would respond. But I'll be honest, I just didn't know how they were trying to break this Arsenal side down, because you've got Richarlison up front and you're swinging in crosses from both sides, but you've got David Raya, you've got Gabriel, you've got Saliba, you've got essentially the 2 centre-backs playing full-backs of White and Tomiyasu. At no point are Spurs ever going to win a header in that situation. And even in front of those, you've got Thomas Partey and Declan Rice, and 2 6-foot and above defensive midfielders. I just thought there was no movement of dragging players out of position and then filling the spaces and making runs. I mean, I probably didn't help by the fact that James Maddison was taken off the pitch at that moment in time, even though Kulusevski was doing a good job. But Maddison wasn't having a good game, and Kulusevski was doing all of his best work outside the final third and in the build-up. So, yeah, I think it maybe on hindsight, it might be quite easy for me to say I don't think Spurs were going to score. But again, it didn't look like Arsenal were going to let them score. And I think maybe that's a credit, because I don't think Arsenal were at their best in this game in an attacking sense. But I think defensively they were. And it was only the chances they gave to Spurs really on a silver platter that meant that Spurs were in the game.
Yeah, I think Arsenal if we look at the pitch in terms of thirds, Arsenal's defensive third, I think, was superb in this game. Really, really, really good. And Spurs, maybe in their attacking third, I think they struggled. It seemed like when they got the opportunity to sort of counter and move forward, there was a lot of space opening up when they won that ball high, but then they just sort of stopped and tried to recycle it and rebuild and try and control the game. And I think that's one of Spurs' most dangerous weapons, is when they're moving that ball in pace, getting those quick players in behind when they have the chance to. And it just felt like in this game they were winning that ball, and I think Spurs dominated the middle third of the pitch, but once they moved that ball into the final third, they just, as you said, they just didn't really do enough with it, and maybe didn't challenge Arsenal as much as they could have done.
Yeah, and I think the word there is, from what you said, is tempo. They can play really well and create chances when they're playing a game at high speed and it's end to end. But when the games slow down and have to create something from themselves, then they really struggle. And I think that's something they need to work on going towards next season. I think it's become quite obvious that there are a few areas in that attacking third, even though it's done really well for Spurs, still need a little bit of improvement. But if we're looking ahead for both sides, Spurs and Arsenal, it does feel like maybe Spurs are now, with the fixtures that have remaining, still got to play Chelsea, they've got to play Liverpool, they've got to play Manchester City. It looks like they're probably going to end up finishing fifth. And for Arsenal, with 3 games to go, they've got to do their very best to get all 9 points out of those remaining fixtures, because Manchester City are going to do their best to win those games as well. But what do you think of Spurs and Arsenal this season in general, and where do you think they will finish? Because it looks like maybe fifth for Spurs, but also who knows really?
Yeah, I think realistically Spurs will end up finishing fifth. Obviously, Villa are now 7 points ahead of them. Spurs do have those 2 games in hand, but with that point difference and Spurs fixtures, I think it's going to be fifth place, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. They'll be gutted considering how well they especially started that season, and that their aspirations are going to be to get into that top 4. But I think the first season, when you've lost one of your best players in your club's history, I think it's fair to say, in Harry Kane, the best striker in the world, I think it's fair to say as well. You've got a new manager coming in, you've had a complete system change, you've had a lot of new players coming into the side, especially in terms of their back 4 and goalkeeper. I think a fifth place is a really, really good start for this Spurs rebuild, and something that they can really, really build on for next year and try and push for that top 4. If not, try and be in and around the title race for as long as they can. Maybe not there quite yet in terms of battling for Arsenal and City, but give them a couple years in this rebuild, and I think they've got every chance to keep growing. And I think this is an opportunity for them really to invest and go for it, because I've been very impressed with Spurs a lot this season. Arsenal, on the other hand, 3 games left: Bournemouth at home, United away, and Everton at home. Got to win them all. It's as simple as that. Got to win them all and hope that City drop points. And I think it's less a question maybe about will Arsenal win those games. It's more a question about will City not win all their games.
Yeah, and the side who really needed to win all of their games but haven't done so is Liverpool, as they went away to West Ham at the London Stadium and they drew 2-2. And I guess I should probably go first then, being the Liverpool fan. And if you're a regular listener and watcher of the podcast, then you will know that we have said for weeks that these 3 away games that Liverpool had within 6 days were crucial to if Liverpool were going to win the Premier League title. It was Fulham away, Everton away, and West Ham away. And it started off well last week on the podcast when the Liverpool had just come back on the beating of Fulham 3-1. But then since then, they've lost the Merseyside derby 2-0 at Goodison Park, and they drew 2-2 with West Ham. And even before the Everton result, I was saying Liverpool out of the title race, just because of the fact that I've watched this team this season, and yes, they've done really, really well to get themselves in this position, but they just ran out of steam at the wrong time. And I think, if anything, it kind of Jurgen Klopp's last season has come to a bit of a disappointing and sad end, if anything else. What did you make of Liverpool in this game against West Ham, Toby?
Yeah, I think Liverpool this season, I think we've probably both said that maybe in terms of quality in the season as a whole, they haven't looked as good as Arsenal and City. And I think a lot of their results have come from, I don't know what from, maybe from spirit and from like really, really hard work. I think they're the sort of most efficient and hardest working team, maybe out of the 3. But I think overall, in terms of the season, they maybe have been the 3rd best out of the 3. And I still think you could have gone on to win the title. But as you said, it was these away fixtures. And this one, especially West Ham away, is never an easy game. They can always give teams a lot of trouble. And in this game, I'm not really sure what it was. I think it was almost playing out as expected in terms of a script. I think Liverpool this season have started slow in games, especially in the first half. And West Ham were able to go 1-0 up at half-time. But then Liverpool come back in the second half, as they have done so many times this season. As I was saying, something built on when they go into halftime, they seem to come out a completely different team sometimes. And in this game, they went 2-1 up. I think I would have expected maybe this game to be 3-1 Liverpool, and then Antonio at the end just ruins the script, really, I think, and is able to get a point for West Ham. But yeah, it didn't feel too different maybe to other games this season. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, on the whole, I would say yes. But I do think Liverpool started uncharacteristically slow, even for them, and how slow they've been starting games of football. I mean, that first half, it was a struggle to watch that first half of football. I'll be completely honest. Liverpool were trying to create something, but were quite slow, and they weren't, creating many great chances. And then West Ham were trying to get them on the counter-attack, but the game was kind of being played in the middle third of the pitch. And I think that Bowen goal in the 43rd minute for West Ham to go 1-0 up, although that really, I was kind of glad that the goal went in for the sake of the game, not necessarily from the Liverpool perspective, because I thought that really would have kicked the game into gear in the second half, and we absolutely saw that. I think Robertson in that second half was absolutely up and down that touchline, and I think we're back to the best of Andy Robertson. In the Liverpool's title-winning season, you think of him running up and down, marauding down the left-hand side, outrunning his opponents, probably his winger and the fullback on that side, and I think he got the goal. I think Areola maybe should have done a little bit better. I think the fact that there wasn't much backlift from Robertson when he shot it, and it was from his side foot, there wasn't a lot of power. He got the placement perfectly, but I think Areola did get enough of a hand on it where he should have done better. And then that own goal, I think it goes given down for Areola. It's tough to tell because there were so many deflections from it, but yeah, it was a scruffy goal, but Liverpool at that point did deserve the 2-1 lead. But I have to say, I was quite disappointed in the way that Liverpool conceded the second goal from West Ham. I think it was a lovely header by Antonio, getting in between the space between Konate and Trent Alexander-Arnold, which has been highlighted for several seasons as the space between the right back and the right centre back of Liverpool as being the weaker side, and that's the B side of the defence compared to Van Dijk and Robertson, which is the A side of the defence. And every single time, it's that corridor of uncertainty. Does the fullback go with the winger, or does he go and mark the centre forward, who's made that run to the space? And it all started from about a minute earlier, where Alisson Becker went to catch a ball from a cross. He didn't do it, and he stumbled, and he dropped it. Liverpool cleared it, but then all of a sudden the crowd got into it, and from there they were just clearing the lines. And it seemed a bit panicked, and all from just not catching one ball, it did seem like, I don't know how to describe it apart from it just seemed a bit soft and a bit weak. And if you're a side going for the title, then you cannot be conceding goals like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that probably comes as maybe a reflection of, obviously, as we said, the loss to Everton in the Merseyside derby. After that game, it did feel like the title had already gone for Liverpool, and I think maybe this game, it just wasn't there. I just think they probably felt like there wasn't too much to fight for, that the opportunity had already slipped away. And yeah, I think, as I said, a lot of I think Liverpool's season has come from sort of that momentum. They kept seeming to claw out victories in games, especially in games when they weren't playing well. When they were playing well, they just kept going really, really free-flowing, really quick. And I think as soon as that fell off, and the biggest of that being that Everton loss, I think the rest of the season now is probably sort of going to whimper out, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's such a sad end to the Klopp era, just because these Liverpool players can do better. But I guess in my head, the way I'm trying to justify it and keep myself sane is by saying, do you know what? They probably killed themselves just to try and get themselves into this position that they just ran out of steam. But we need to talk about a couple of situations, let's say, which happened. And this one was in the direct result of the Antonio goal. There was a bit of a touchline spat, let's say, between Klopp and Mohamed Salah, which has been doing the rounds on the internet. It's been everywhere. It's all on the newspapers, mainstream media as well. I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure the viewers have seen it as well. It doesn't look good from the Liverpool perspective. What did you make of it? What's going on?
I don't know where it's come from. Maybe I think it might have been built up frustration of Mo Salah for not starting this game. He's someone who very rarely gets rested. I think it's sort of only been this season where Salah hasn't started games, and it's been quite surprising to give him a rest. Seasons before, he seemed to be playing almost 90 minutes every single game. Maybe some frustration has come from that, and being brought on so late with only sort of 10-15 minutes left. how it erupted so visually on the touchline, I think, is the most shocking thing. Whether they had any conversations after the game, all of questions are now coming up if whether Salah's going to be going to the Saudi League after they put in a bid in the January transfer window and the summer before, whether it's a complete falling out, we don't know, and maybe it's one of those things that's been blown out of proportion. I'm sure you are a lot more clued up on me. Has this been something maybe that's been brewing in the background, and what do you think is going to happen with Salah's future now at Liverpool? Is that potentially up for question?
Yeah, well, it didn't look great. And I'll be honest, the fact that Darwin Núñez was the one breaking it up, I just thought was quite ironic because he's probably the most hot-headed of all of the Liverpool squad. But it seemed, I've seen more angles of the fans trying to record what was going on before it happened. And it just kind of seemed to be something that started because Salah was getting ready. He didn't acknowledge Klopp as he was about to give him a handshake to go on. And then he later on acknowledged him, and then Klopp was like, I'm not having it. You saw me, and you decided not to shake my hand first, and then you decided to try and play a bit of a power move. And I think we saw something similar with Klopp and Henderson like a couple of years ago, and that was again a bit similar to the fact that Henderson got substituted off. He wasn't happy. He didn't shake Klopp's hand, and Klopp was like, "No, you got to shake my hand. I'm the manager. We show respect to each other." And I think in that instance, it's right. The thing is, this wouldn't happen if Klopp wasn't leaving, is what I'm thinking. However, would Mohamed Salah even be on the bench if Klopp was staying? Because if Klopp was staying, with Salah having 1 year left on his contract, there's no way, in my opinion, even if Salah is still carrying a bit of a knock from his injury, that he's on the bench, because Klopp will start him to try and get him on side, to try and get him back into form, and most importantly, to try and get him to sign a new contract. But because Klopp's leaving, that's not his problem. He doesn't have to worry about keeping players happy. He's just going to put out the best 11 to try and win games of football. So that's very interesting to see, and the whole situation around that. I personally think Salah is carrying a bit of a knock, and that he deserves to be on the bench, because I think if we had a fully fit front line, it would be Jota, Diaz and Gakpo at the moment, and Núñez and Salah would be on the bench because at the moment they're simply not delivering. But I think it was interesting, and I think afterwards Salah even said, as he was walking through the media zone, "If I speak, there will be fire." And I just thought there's no reason for you to say that. And today Liverpool have come out and said that they plan on Salah staying and being involved with them next season. Obviously, they're not going to come out and say that they don't agree with Salah and they want to sell Salah, because even if they wanted to sell him, that reduces value. So they're obviously going to say they want him and he's going to be part of the plans. I just think it's so unnecessary. You're losing games of football, and even this one, it feels like you lost, but you're just drawing, but you're adding more fuel to the fire when it doesn't need to be, and you're already doing badly. It's such a sour end. But we should probably talk about the other incident, this time from a refereeing perspective, with Areola and Cody Gakpo and Anthony Taylor, the referee, where Areola throws the ball, Gakpo goes to run to it, and seemingly Anthony Taylor, the referee, doesn't blow his whistle, and Gakpo, if he didn't stop, could have gone and scored the goal into an open net. Now, this is a strange one. I don't think I've seen anything quite like it. What did you make of it?
Yeah, it was a really weird one, this. And when I first saw it, I thought, why has the ref blown his whistle and stopped this? Areola has clearly just made a complete mistake, and Gakpo should have just put the ball in the back of the net. However, I think on reviewing it again, it seemed like Anthony Taylor had his hand up for advantage as opposed to having his hand on for just play on. I'm 90% sure Taylor was playing advantage, and maybe Areola assumed that there was no advantage, that the free kick had been given. Maybe Taylor had said something in terms of, foul advantage. Areola, just his foul or something, puts the ball down. And I think this is one of those weird occasions where I think the ref has maybe just used a bit of common sense. There was a bit of miscommunication there, but I think as it was resulted off of a foul, it would have felt very unfair, I think, for Gakpo to be able to put the ball in the net. But maybe as a Liverpool fan, you think, what is he doing? Put the ball in the net, worry about that later.
Oh, I'm absolutely thinking that, yeah. I'm just thinking, put the ball in the back of the net, get the yellow card if you're wrong, but if you're right, then, happy days. And I don't know the specific ruling on it, because how long afterwards can you bring the ball back from an advantage situation? Because, first of all, it's not a foul. Well, it is a foul on Areola initially, but the referee hasn't given a foul. So I assume that Areola thinks a foul has been given and a free kick has been given, because there's no other situation in which a goalkeeper rolls the ball out and then goes to sort out his socks. You sort out your socks first with one hand, with the ball under your armpit in the other hand. So I'm just like, he must think a free kick's been given. Free kick hasn't been given. It's actually an advantage. So the Gakpo is within his rights. But I do know what you mean. It is so messy. But at that point, I just didn't even care because I was just so sad about Liverpool. But it is interesting, and I don't know. I'll just be completely honest. I don't know what was the right thing to happen in this one. And we probably need a refereeing expert to come on and explain it to us, along with a lot of decisions so far this season. But yes, in my opinion, I think Liverpool are firmly out of the title race, and third place is where we're going to finish. But briefly on West Ham before we move on, Toby, a much needed point after 2 consecutive draws, and they've got Chelsea away, Luton at home, and Manchester City away in the last 3 games, and it might be tough for them to even finish in the top 10 this season.
Yeah, especially with a lot of those teams around them seem to be picking up points very, very quickly. Looking at, as we'll be touching on later, obviously, Bournemouth, Wolves, Fulham, Chelsea still got a few games in hand as well, Newcastle. There's a lot of teams sort of picking up a bit of momentum around them at the moment, and they seem to almost be doing the opposite. They had that early season momentum along with the likes of Brighton, and it seems in recent weeks both of them have not been in the best form. But I think a point against Liverpool is a really, really good result for them. They could still get a decent result, I think, against Chelsea and Luton. Maybe not so Man City, but I don't think many can. So it's going to be a funny end to the season for West Ham, and I think we're going to have to wait to the end of the season to really reflect on them as a whole, and obviously still the big question marks around the fan base, and reflect on David Moyes' position as a whole as well.
Yes, and well, you mentioned that team there, Chelsea, as we move on to our third game, which is Aston Villa 2, Chelsea 2. And it's an interesting thing about Chelsea is you never know what performance you're going to get from them. And then after losing to Arsenal 5-0 in midweek, like we mentioned, you expected a response in this game. But it was actually Aston Villa who were on top for the majority of the first half, and they found themselves 2-0 up going into half-time. And you thought to yourself, oh my God, here we go again with same old Chelsea. But they had a bit of a comeback, maybe could have won it right at the end. But yeah, starting off with Aston Villa, I mean, good first half, terrible second half. Is that a fair assessment?
I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment, yeah. And I think even in that first half, I don't think they were incredible. I think they were good enough. I think Chelsea were also pretty decent in that first half, and I think would have felt a bit gutted going into the half-time at 2-0 down. I think they did really, really well to carry on and not to sort of falter, because it could have been they would have just lost hope, given up in that second half like they did, I think, against Arsenal in that second half. Chelsea were awful, and they were okay in the first half. So I think they did well to keep that going, keep the morale going, and not falter, and stage a really, really good comeback in that second half from Chelsea. I think overall Aston Villa were decent in that first half. They were very clinical, very efficient. They got into some nice positions well and took their chances when they came. And then in that second half, it was the opposite from Aston Villa, who completely fell off and really let Chelsea back into that game.
Yeah, I thought it was surprising actually throughout the game how deep Villa were, especially at home. I thought they would have given Chelsea a bit more of a game, would have gone at them more. But I think in that first half, it definitely played to their strengths and Chelsea's weaknesses, and the fact that Chelsea was struggling to break them down. But I think in that second half, maybe they just invited the pressure on a little bit too much. But one player that I really want to talk about is Morgan Rogers, obviously signed from Middlesbrough in January for a fee of £8 million, rising up to £16 million with add-ons. And he's actually done really well. He's only still 21 years of age, and he's got 3 goals and 1 assist in the Premier League so far in 10 appearances. And I think when Aston Villa also have wide players with the calibre and quality of Leon Bailey, Moussa Diaby, John McGinn can play out there as well. I think he's really, really impressed me as someone who's come in immediately, had an instant impact, and improved this Aston Villa side, which is very, very difficult to do considering they're 4th in the Premier League at the moment. So I just wanted to give him a little shout out because he got his goal, the second for Aston Villa on the day in the 42nd minute. And I think the way he wrong-foots a defender and the way he scores, I think it's something that you probably see from a seasoned pro, not something you'd see from a 21-year-old. And I know players are playing more often, more at a younger age. But I think, he's been really impressed me. Someone who I didn't expect to hit the ground running. And I think credit to him. But one of the other wide players for Chelsea who did have a fantastic game, especially in that second half, was Noni Madueke and Conor Gallagher as well. And their link-up play, I thought was phenomenal. I thought the fact that Enzo Fernandez is out injured now for the remainder of the season, and the fact that Conor Gallagher is playing a little bit deeper isn't the worst case scenario, because I think sometimes that midfield of Caicedo, Fernandez and Gallagher can be a bit one-dimensional, lack a bit of creativity. But I think the link-up play between Gallagher and Madueke was actually phenomenal, with Cole Palmer just a little bit inside, being a bit more of that conductor in that midfield and orchestrating the whole team's attack. I thought it was something to actually look forward to going forward.
Yeah, we touched on this a lot in the first half of the season. I remember whilst Cole Palmer was sort of mainly playing as a right winger, we saw Caicedo, Fernandez and Gallagher playing not even as a midfield three, but playing as a 2 and a 1. And it would sometimes be Gallagher sort of shifting forward into that space. It would sometimes be Fernandez shifting forward into that space. And I just don't think that worked well as a midfield unit. And I still don't think it does. I think it's much better if it's Caicedo and Fernandez with Palmer ahead of them, or Caicedo and Gallagher with Palmer ahead of them. And I'm sure Chelsea fans will be a lot more clued up on me who's had a better season. But for me, it seems like I think Gallagher maybe suits that role a little bit more. And I'm not too sure where Fernandez fits into the system that Poch is playing in a 4-2-3-1. I think for Fernandez, I think he'd be much better as a sort of a left-sided 8 maybe in a 3. And I don't think Poch is going to be playing that anytime soon, especially as you want Palmer occupying that number 10 position as much as you can, being their best player, being their most creative as well. So I think it's been good to see Gallagher, especially in this game, really shine. Someone who can sit back and support Caicedo really, really well, which I think is maybe where Fernandez lacks a little bit, but can also drive forward, pick out a pass, and in this case score an absolute worldie with his weak foot. It was all the Aston Villa players, I think, were sort of sitting off, just sit at the edge of our box. He's not going to do anything from here. And it's absolutely whips it into the top corner. Really, really nice goal, and good to see, because he has obviously been at the club for a number of years, had that fantastic loan spell with Palace, and see it sort of on and off when he does or doesn't play. I think when he does play for Chelsea, he plays really, really well and has been one of their standout players this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And you could maybe even make an argument for player of the season had it not been for Cole Palmer, because he has truly been exceptional. But apart from him, I think Conor Gallagher is the player he's the closest to him in terms of his performances this season. And you needed a special strike from him, especially on his weaker foot, because in this game, Chelsea had 71% possession, 21 shots. However, only 5 of them were on target. And you really needed a special strike to try and break down that Aston Villa defence. But late on in the game, in the 97th minute of the game, Chelsea thought they'd gone on and won it. The Axel Disasi goal got overturned by VAR, because apparently there was a foul in the build-up by Badiashile on Carlos. And I'll go first. And as the defender, I did think it was a foul. I have a feeling you may disagree, but just because when I was trying to think about it, okay, what's the defender trying to do? What's Diego Carlos trying to do? As a defender, you're told, get yourself between the man and the ball, because if the opposition player has to try and get that ball, the only way he's going to get it is through you, and if it's through you, it's a foul. And for me, I think just because he shoulder barges Carlos in the back and it's not the side to side or shoulder to shoulder, sorry, I think for me that is a foul, even though I think it is soft, and I'm not sure that it's enough for VAR to overturn it. But if the referee gives that as a foul, I don't think VAR overturns it either. So for me, the correct decision was made, although I'm not sure if VAR should have intervened, is the point I'm trying to make. How did you see, Toby? I think as an attacker, you might have a different perspective.
You thought wrong, Mev. I used to play as a defender in under 8s, under 9s, so this is coming through now. But yeah, I think it was definitely a foul. I think, as you said, it was a shoulder in the back. It's always going to be a foul. And I think as well, you can see Badiashile, he takes as the ball is in the air and sort of spinning over, he takes his eye off the ball and looks into Carlos and then steps. There's no intent to go directly for that ball. His intent is get Carlos out the way by fouling him, then get the ball. So yeah, for me, it was 100% a foul. I think the VAR intervention, maybe sort of question marks, but I think that late stage in the game, with the importance of the goal in terms of the scoreline, they did the right thing to step in and rule this one out, because it would have been a mistake for me, I think, if they didn't.
Wow, fair enough. We actually agree on that one. Okay, I didn't expect that whatsoever, so that's good to hear. And I suppose for Aston Villa, that now the result, the means, and especially with the Spurs result on Sunday, now means that even if Spurs win the game in hand, Aston Villa will be fourth outright. They just need to focus on winning the remaining games, which is going to be very, very important for them in their bid to try and secure Champions League football next season. Obviously, they've got their Conference League semi-final against Olympiacos in midweek, which is surely going to be a tasty encounter. And a side who are also chasing Europe is Newcastle United, as they beat Sheffield United 5-1 on the day. But let's start with the Blades, as they are now officially relegated from the Premier League this season. And I think they were one of the favourites to go down. I think that's fair to say. And I think they flattered to deceive this season. I think there's been a real lack of quality from Sheffield United. Maybe not just this game, but overall the entire season, Toby. How would you say they've done?
I think the fact that they are probably going to break the record for most goals conceded in the Prem, and that's including when it was a 42-game season, kind of sums it up. They just defensively have not been anywhere near good enough, leaking goals and not even leaking sort of 2 or 3 goals consistently. It's been the performances like this where they are letting in 5, 6 goals on a regular basis, which maybe doesn't even talk about the quality or the setup. I think it talks about how it just seems like they completely almost give up defensively in a sense in a lot of games, which is really, really disappointing. And I think it's a good reflection on this game as well, because they started very, very well and they had a good number of chances in this game. I think they could have easily got a point out of this game, maybe even won it if they showed some solidity in the back. It just fell apart, and to lose 5-1 makes it seem like they were awful, but that they were actually not bad in this game. And it's a shame, because they just have been at times, like I said, nowhere near good enough, unfortunately, and they'll need to do a very decent, I think, rebuild to get a side that's not only good enough to get back into the Prem, but one that's going to get back into the Prem and then stay there.
Yeah, and we said it right at the beginning of the season, and that's that they didn't even give themselves a fighting chance. Selling your 2 best players, Iliman and Dye to Marseille, and also Sanderberg, to your relegation rivals Burnley, I think was just, the catalyst for, okay, we're going to get money for these players. We need to take that money because we can't let their contracts run out and let them go for free. And then they were so under-equipped into the season. They had Paul Higginbottom, remember, at the beginning of the season. I think they probably sacked him at the right time. I think they gave him a very fair shot at the time. And I think to sack him at that time, bring in Chris Wilder. But I think now the questions are maybe about the future of Sheffield United in the Championship, is that they gave Chris Wilder an 18-month contract. So it's going to be him again next season. Do you want to give him that next season the Championship? Do you maybe want to bring in a new manager, a younger manager with fresh ideas, more attractive style of football, try and, have a complete overhaul, not only in the players, but in the style of play as well? That's something they've got to probably consider, and they've got they've probably been considering it for a few months now, let alone the last few weeks. But I think, it's been a very sorry end to Sheffield United, and it would have been interesting to see, had Chris Wilder been at the beginning of the season, and had they had some of these players playing like this, because like you said in the first half, Toby, they were really, really good. They were really, really good. They had great chances. They even took the lead through Ahmed Hodzic. I think they worked the short corner really well. They were looking really dangerous from their short corners. But I just thought, Trusty had a chance where he put the ball over the top to Archer. Archer did Fabian shot, and then if it wasn't for a last challenge from Dan Burn, he would have scored. I think, I'm trying to think who else had a chance. They had loads of chances in that first half. I think they had once where they hit the woodwork. They had a follow from that shot, which were just wide as well. I think it's so disappointing, because I don't want to see anyone go down just for the sake of it. I just want to see everyone give it a good go. But I think Sheffield United fans would be so demoralised. But on the opposite side, I think Newcastle fans would be delighted, because that second half performance, especially that 10-minute spell where they scored 3 goals, they were absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, attacking-wise, Newcastle, I don't think there's been many question marks over them. They've got a real number of talented forwards, especially looking at Gordon and Alexander Isak, who both were electric in this game again. I absolutely love watching them play. They're both so young, so quick, and so confident as well, which I think is a massive, massive thing. Isak now, he's on 19 goals in 26 appearances. He hasn't even played every game for Newcastle, and only 23 of those were starts as well. He's been on absolute fire, and I think has really this season been the player that we've expected when he came to Newcastle and sort of the hot prospects that everyone's been talking about. And the same with Anthony Gordon. We had a lot of hype, I think, when he first broke out at Everton, maybe sort of fell off a little bit towards, especially when he was signed. There were big question marks over the price, whether he was worth it. And he has just been a fantastic footballer to watch. I really, really love watching him play. So yeah, for going forward for Newcastle, lots and lots of positives. Still for me, a lot of question marks of them at the back. I think to concede as many chances as they did against the side who are rock bottom at the bottom of the league and quite a way off a lot of the other teams in the league, I think is a little bit worrying. And I know they've had a few sort of defensive injuries, a lot of midfield injuries as well, which a lot of Newcastle's defending does come from that middle third. It just looked really, really open at times. And I think that's something that they really need to reinforce in the summer. They need to get some defensive reinforcements, freshen up that squad a little bit and really work on that defence. And they could be back in that top four next season, I think, if they fix that defence, which is the big fixing point, I think, for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's say that they do have Nick Pope back fit and available. I think that automatically improves them side considerably. I think Ken Trippier's back for soon. But I think it is definitely the defence which is going to need reinforcements in that summer. And I think Newcastle now, from all the talk about Eddie Howe at the middle stage of the season where things results weren't going great, was he the right manager? Is he the right manager to take them to the next level? They only find themselves 1 point behind Manchester United in 6th place, and they have a goal difference which is 18 better than Man United as well. So all that being said, Newcastle do play Man United in a couple of weeks, and that could be a crucial game for trying to secure European football next season. And I think, you know what, I think Newcastle fans have, some of them were saying Eddie Howe out, but I think they've now changed the tune because I think they've realised that, okay, do you know what, there were extenuating circumstances and he's done right, and at least deserves a summer transfer window and go into next season. And I'll be honest, the way they're playing at the moment, I think they could get that 6th place.
Yeah, especially when you look at the way maybe Man United are playing at times as well. That definitely could be an opportunity for Newcastle. And I think maybe last season, I think that Champions League qualification came a little bit too early, maybe in sort of their project with the investment that they have had. And maybe it seems a little bit disappointing this season. But I think if last season they finished around 7th or 8th, maybe as we would have expected, given the jump up that they did have from when that investment came in and when Howe came in, they were sitting really, really low in the league. Then maybe this season wouldn't be looking as bad as it did at times.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that last season was definitely an overperformance on their part. I think you did have some underachieving teams, the likes of Liverpool. I mean, Chelsea haven't been in the Champions League for a little while now. So I think it's fair to say that they did really well, especially with no European football. But I think this season, to have that experience and to have that little taster of, we want that again, we really want that again, and to now say, okay, fine, do you know what, maybe we're going to get just Europe, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the Champions League, but this season they can have Europe. Maybe if they get the Europa League or the Conference League. I mean, we've seen what West Ham did with the Conference League last season. We saw what Aston Villa did with the Conference League this season. I think if they get the Conference League, they're probably going to be the favourites. But I think Europa League, with the squad they have at the moment, and if they add some key additions to really bolster up the squad, could be probably this, the European competition where they could do the best in. Probably not what Newcastle fans wanted. They probably won the Champions League, but I think the side is gearing up towards the Champions League, but they're not ready for it quite yet, if we're being honest. But one side who have done really well so far this season, after a very shaky start where they only picked up 3 points in the first 9 games, is Bournemouth, as they beat Brighton 3-0. And Iraola has picked up a lot of slack over the course of the beginning stage of the season, from pundits, mainstream media saying it was a mistake to sack Gary O'Neill after he was doing fantastic with Wolves, but Iraola has really turned this Bournemouth side around, and to the fact now that they're in the top 10 and Brighton aren't, it's just credit to show how well they've been doing this season.
Yeah, they've had 2 sort of really good spells, Bournemouth so far this season. I think it didn't start particularly well, and they were sitting right towards the bottom of the league. And then they had this 10-game spell, I think it was, where they won maybe 6 or 7 games, sort of around, I think it was like late autumn going into sort of that Christmas period. They were really, really good. And then it sort of fell off again, and we were thinking, oh, luckily they had that spell. They weren't playing too well for another few games. And then again recently it's picked up. It's been really cut into like sections of form this season, Bournemouth. And I think if they can do this consistently over an entire season, next year, I think they're going to be one of those sides who are really going to look to get into the top half of the league, maybe even try and claw one of those sort of 8th place positions. I really think Bournemouth could do that if they can be consistent next year, and that consistency is something that they need to work on and get, because when they are playing at their best, they look so good. Especially in this game, I think they were absolutely exceptional. Brighton are a really, really strong Premier League team now. They are normally very comfortably going to be top half. Not so at the moment, and Bournemouth made them look really, really poor. Brighton didn't defend particularly well, and they haven't done in a number of weeks. Played a few youngsters and did look quite open, but Bournemouth just took full advantage, completely dominated this game, and it could have been more than 3, which I think says enough, really.
Yeah, I think Bournemouth are playing as if they're a side who are competing for Europe, which is, I think, one of the biggest compliments you can give them, because I saw this stat, and I will give credit to Match of the Day because I didn't come up with it myself, but I saw that Bournemouth, since the 1st of November, only Manchester City, Liverpool, Arsenal and Aston Villa, the current top 4, have got more points since the 1st of November than Bournemouth. And I thought that is an absolutely mental stat. And you know what, a few weeks ago, it was only a couple of weeks ago, we were saying Roberto De Zerbi is being linked with all the top jobs, the Liverpool job, the Man United job, Bayern Munich, Barcelona, and all of a sudden you're now thinking, hang on, maybe Iraola is not a bad manager that top clubs should be looking at, and how the narrative has changed from the beginning of the season. I think credit to everyone at Bournemouth and Iraola, because, yeah, in this game, like you said, Toby, Bournemouth were all over Brighton. And I think the epitome of that was, for me, Justin Kluivert, who had a bit of a few injury issues at the beginning of the season, really found his form in the second half, and he was absolutely everywhere. Got his goal on the day, and not only that, I think his pressing, his work rate off the ball, something that, I wasn't sure that he had in him. I thought he maybe was a bit of a luxury player coming into Bournemouth, but he's absolutely bought into the project, bought into the club. And I think, yeah, Bournemouth are a fantastic side. Top half for little old Bournemouth. I thought, yeah, they've been phenomenal this season. And Brighton, oh dear, Brighton. I think the injuries have curtailed the season massively. I do have sympathy for them. I think I saw the average age of the lineup was 23.7, which is very, very, very young if you're unaware. And also, if you take out the veterans of Lewis Dunk and Pascal Gross, who are well into their 30s, then all of a sudden that average age comes down even further. And I think Brighton, if anything, they probably just won the end of the season.
Yeah, they really need that, and I think maybe the only positive of this poor spell is that De Zerbi might not be off in the summer. I think a few teams will be turned off given their sort of recent performances, especially in this second half of the season, just haven't been good enough. They have this project, and we always talk about Brighton in terms of signing youngsters, looking for the next big star, someone to come in and maybe move on, like your Caicedo especially, I think was the one that's really, really shone a light on that system. I just think, as you said, they need a bit more experience. They need players who are at that level to sort of be in the top half, as opposed to those who are maybe coming through. Their squad is very, very young, and I think they need to invest in some quality this summer, some quality reinforcements as well, in terms of when they've had injuries, the players, I think, stepping up haven't really been quite good enough. Otherwise, I think we could see sort of Brighton start to slip down a little bit. And I'm a massive, massive fan of Brighton. I'm always saying how impressed I am with their style of play. They always seem to play well, which is really good and sustainable, and something that Bournemouth have got this season as well, that they always seem to play well, even if they don't get a result, which I think when you're looking long-term over sort of 3 or 4 years, that can be more important than picking up points right now in the moment. But they've just got some work to do, because there is always potential in that Brighton side for them to be up and around the Europa League, Conference League places. And I think if they don't address a few of these issues over the summer, then they could lose the opportunity to sort of be sticking around that area of the table.
Well, I don't know, actually, because I think with this really bad run of form as of late, and I think De Zerbi will probably end up staying at Brighton. I'm not willing to put my money where my mouth is on that one, because I think he's going to be a top manager, and I think the potential is there in him. But I think I'm not sure, if you were looking for new players in the summer, which of the Brighton players you would take, not only because of they're going to demand such a high transfer fee, but also because of the injury record. Like, are you really going to take Matoma after he's been out for half the season? You're not going to take Solly Marsh because of his age and how long he's been out. Evan Ferguson hasn't quite done it. João Pedro's first season in the league. Gross and Dunk are getting on a bit. So I'm not sure if that squad is going to get gutted like it did in the last summer when they lost McAllister and they lost Casado, and in previous summers where they lost Cucurella and other players. I think they're in an okay position, but I do think they'll be disappointed because they had Conference League football this season. Not just Conference League football, sorry, Europa League football this season. That actually did really well last year. So I think maybe last year was an overachievement, a bit like we're talking about for Newcastle. And I think this year will probably end up being a bit of an underachievement. And I think the level is actually somewhere in the middle of that. And next season, when they get the players fit, they can do a lot better. And we should finally finish up by touching on Bournemouth, who have now achieved their highest ever points tally in the Premier League season. And I actually thought that was quite remarkable, 48 points, especially when you consider that Bournemouth had some very decent sides under Eddie Howe in the last few years. So for them to do it at this stage of the season with 3 games left to go is a phenomenal achievement for the club, isn't it?
Yeah, and it'll be interesting to see, as I said, with Brighton probably needing some experienced reinforcement in the summer. Bournemouth have obviously had a pretty significant financial investment themselves, and it would be good to see if they can put some of that money into the club now. They can see that there is something building, try and take advantage of that, get some more players in, because I think they've got a pretty decent starting 11. A few positions could potentially be improved on, and I think if they can improve that bench and get some more exciting players that they can bring on and try and improve sort of the floor of that squad, as opposed to signing a massive wonder kid, maybe sort of bring the rest of the team up, get some challengers, I think, in for that starting 11 to really push each other. I think Bournemouth will definitely be one to keep an eye on next season.
Absolutely, and hopefully my performances in the quiz can be better next season, because this season I'm still flagging behind you, Toby, as we are entering the not halftime quiz. I don't think we can call it the halftime quiz anymore, for being honest. It's got to be the 3/4 of the way podcast quiz. But yes, we are doing football tenable. And Toby, what are the scores so far?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the 3/4 quiz is good. Is quite as catchy. It might give me another 10 takes on the intro to get that one in. But in terms of scores, it is 26 to myself and 23 to you. So a 3-point gap with how many more rounds of the quiz are there going to be? Only probably 3 or 4 with the season coming to a close as well. So it's all to play for, as I always say.
Yes, it is all to play for. And if you're unfamiliar, we are doing football tenable, where you have to name 10 answers for a particular topic. So, for example, it could be who are the top 10 in the Premier League this season. Toby would then have to name the top 10, and for every incorrect guess, he would lose a life, 3 lives, and you're out. But this week, who wants to go first, Toby? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, let's go first. Come on.
Okay. So I should probably get a timer up. I always forget to get the timer up. I'm like, I've got everything ready. I've got my notes and I've got my pen and my paper and whatever, but I always forget to get a timer. Right, timer. 5 minutes. As you can tell, I'm stalling. But here we go. I'm ready now. Are you ready, Toby?
I'm ready.
Okay. So I would like you to name me the 10 players with the most appearances in Champions League history. Your time starts now.
Okay. This is going to be interesting. I am going to start with who I think used to be number 1, maybe. Casillas?
That is tenable. He is number 2 with 177 appearances.
Nice. Okay. It's going to be a lot of Real Madrid players in here, so I might as well throw in. He's got to be in there. Cristiano Ronaldo.
He is tenable. He is number 1 with 183.
183. That is absolutely mental. He's got to be in here as well. Surely. Messi.
He is tenable. He's number 3 with 163.
Nice. Okay. Again, he's just got to be in there. Sergio Ramos.
Sergio Ramos is tenable. He's number 9 with 142.
142. Okay, that's actually lower than I thought it was going to be. Okay, I think he might be in here. Benzema
is tenable. He's number 4 with 152.
Nice. Okay.
Smashing it.
This is a good start. Just farming Real Madrid players. Right. There's another one who might be in there, and I'm thinking of Buffon maybe, just because of the longevity of his career. And he's a keeper; they always play. We got lives. Let's go for it. Buffon.
He unfortunately is not tenable, and that is your first life gone.
That's all right. I'm thinking.
Good logic though.
I'm not answering these ones, but I'm thinking Raul. I think could be in there because he was top scorer for a while as well. I'm thinking Marcelo as well, potentially. Who else could be in and around there? Could be any of Kroos, Modric, and Casemiro. More likely Kroos, I think, because Modric had a number of years at Tottenham. Any other players who are going to be in there? Someone like Xavi, Iniesta, Busquets. Again, they could all be in. Oh, Dani Alves could be in there as well. Roberto Carlos as well could be up there. I don't think he had enough there, Roberto Carlos. Are there going to be any other players that miss? Someone like Neuer maybe could be in there. He's been obviously Bayern's keeper for so long. They won it twice whilst he was keeper. So it's a long
2 minutes
stint.
left.
Let's go for Neuer.
That is your second life gone. He is not tenable. Maybe stay away from the goalkeepers.
Yeah. It's between Marcelo and Raul. I'm going to go for Raul.
He is tenable. He's number 8 with 142.
Okay. So I've got Marcelo and Roberto Carlos are two that I'm thinking of. I'm just going to have to stick with Madrid. I think they're the only people who are going to be in there because they just win it so much and get to the final so much. Or Dani Alves, I think, is another one who could be in there.
With 1 minute 10 seconds to go, I will give you a hint. You've said 2. You've got 6 so far. You said 2 of the names, and you haven't said 2 of the other names.
Let's go for Roberto Carlos.
He is not tenable, unfortunately, Toby.
So I've still got one life left. Okay, let's go for Busquets.
And that is it. You are done. That is not tenable, I'm afraid.
No.
So you actually did really well.
6?
Yeah, you got 6, and I couldn't name as many as you did there. So you got Ronaldo.
Who was missing?
You got Casillas. You got Messi. You got Benzema. Number 5, you said him, Xavi Hernandez. Yeah.
He
Number
started
6.
young, so.
Number 6, you didn't say him, Thomas Muller.
Oh yeah, that would have been a good one. I should have maybe branched out.
Number 7, you mentioned him, Toni Kroos.
Yeah.
8 was Raul, which you got. 9 was Ramos, which you got. And number 10, you didn't mention him, was Ryan Giggs.
Wow, I never would have said Ryan Giggs. That's an interesting one. I guess just the longevity of his career as well, wasn't it?
That's exactly it, isn't it? It's just the longevity. I mean, he was there for years and years, and Man United over those years always got Champions League football.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I guess it's also appearances, not
6
just
isn't bad.
stats. It's not bad. It's okay. It takes you to 32. Come on, mate. If I can get 10 here.
Okay, I think you can get a decent score on this. I am looking for the outfield 10 for England's semi-final at the World Cup 2018 versus Croatia. Your time starts now.
That is not good because I was so drunk during that game. I don't remember it too well. Okay, so I'm going to say Pickford was in goal. I think we were playing 2018, playing a back 3. I'm not sure. So one player who definitely there was Harry Kane.
Harry Kane is tenable. He is the 10th player on this list going from back to front.
Okay. I I feel like Raheem Sterling was definitely there. So I'm going to say Raheem Sterling.
And you've got number 9 working your way back. That's tenable.
Okay, and I think he would have been off the left. Who would have been off the right? Maybe a bit early for Foden. Maybe a bit early for Saka. I think at the back Harry Maguire was there. I'm sure he was there. Or was it maybe... Yeah, no, I'm going to say him. Yeah, I'm going to say him. Harry Maguire.
You're going... Sorry, your mic cut out there. Not trying to...
I'm going Harry Maguire.
Harry Maguire is number 1. He is tenable.
Number 1, which maybe doesn't necessarily mean he's...
To be fair, this is just written out in my list, but it's kind of back to front, if you know what I mean.
Okay, I'm going to say Kyle Walker.
Was that Kyle Walker? Sorry, you cut out again.
Yes.
Kyle Walker is tenable.
That is...
He is on there.
Okay.
He is third.
I will then say Ashley Young.
Ashley Young is an absolutely superb shout, and he is tenable. That was, I think, for me, the toughest one on the list.
He was taking corners as left wing back. I remember that.
Nice.
How much time do you have left?
So you are just under halfway. So, as in, you've got over half left.
Okay. The defense, was Tyrone Mings in that defense? Which I don't know. I'm going to say him because I'm pretty sure he's there. John Stones.
He is there. That's all your centre backs done. He is tenable.
All my centre backs done. Maybe Walker is one of the centre backs, and maybe Kieran Trippier was further up. Okay, I'm going to say Kieran Trippier.
Tenable again. He's going for the perfect run.
Okay, so that was a back three. Walker, Maguire, Stones, Young. I need 2 midfielders and someone up top on the right-hand side. Midfielders, okay. No Jared Lambert's goals. We could... Okay, I'm going to write this down. I'm not saying it. We could have Eric Dyer. Could have Jordan Henderson. It could... I don't... Maybe it's Calvin Phillips. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm going to say Jordan Henderson.
Still on that hot streak, Mev. Another tenable. 2 to go.
Okay. Who was on that right wing? There is a gap in my knowledge between 2016, Daniel Sturridge playing right wing against Iceland, to now. How much time do I have left?
You have got around a minute left.
Oh. Okay, let's start writing off the names. I'm going to say Eric Dyer.
Eric Dyer is not tenable, unfortunately. He did come on in the game, but he was not a starter.
Okay. Who were our midfielders? Was it Rice? Well, I feel like 6 years ago, Rice, I was a bit young. I don't think he was good enough for West Ham, but I'll write him down. God, okay. Rooney? No, Rooney's gone by then. Can't think. I really don't know about these last two. I can't think of names.
30 seconds left.
I'm going to say Calvin Phillips.
It's not Calvin Phillips, unfortunately. That's another life gone. Think maybe a little further forward.
Further forward. It's not James Ward-Prowse. Oh, there's a little gap in the timeline.
10 seconds left now.
I can't even think of names. Bukayo Saka.
It is not a 16-year-old Saka, unfortunately. That is not tenable.
No, I can't. No, I'm done. I can't think of names.
And that's time anyway. Unlucky, mate. But an 8 is very good, especially getting the Ashley Young shout. That is a cracking bit of knowledge there. 2 players you're looking for. I'm not really sure what formation this team even was, because the 2 players you're missing out on were Dele Alli in red hot form around the time.
Yeah.
And Jesse Lingard was the last player we were missing out on.
Ah.
So I'm not sure if I think it was maybe like a 5-1-3-2, 5-1-2-2. Yeah, it'd be 5-1-2-2. I'm not really sure, and we lost, so
I
maybe
mean,
that's why.
yeah, rather you justifying it than me. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe Lingard was on the wing and Ali was in a double pivot with Jordan Henderson.
Yeah, whichever way you put
I
it, it
don't
doesn't
know.
seem quite right, does it? But 8 out of 10, mate,
No,
is
no.
very, very decent, and it puts you up to 31 points, and I'm just ahead by a point on 32, so super close still. And you've made
I
some ground.
know it is very, very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to the last few weeks. I think it is 3 weeks left of the Premier League season, so yeah, that's going to be very, very close. And a team who are taking it all the way down to the wire are Manchester City, as they continue to not falter and continue to pick up 3 points. This time against Nottingham Forest away from home at the City ground. But it was a very tough fought victory for City. They did not have it their own way, and Nottingham Forest put up a very decent game, didn't they?
Yeah, in that first half, Forest, I think, were excellent. They really, really just went for it, which I think is something to admire. They when that space came open, sort of in Man City's mid and defensive thirds, in those wide half spaces that we do see quite often, they had Alanga running at them. They had Gibbs White. They had Callum Hudson-Odoi, all really, really trying to get into those dangerous areas and create chances for Forest, which I think is something we weren't expecting. I think maybe we would have expected to see Forest really sit back and just try to see out a 0-0 draw, but they really went for that in the first half, and they could have got a couple goals, I think, even in that first half. City was still good, very good at times, especially in terms of possession. They did control the game, I think, pretty well. It was just they did let Forest have maybe a few two moments and more than a lot of us, I think, were expecting.
Yeah, absolutely. It was when City were able to get their foot on the ball and continue to get spells of pressure and to recycle the ball and then continue to pepper Nottingham Forest's goal. That's when Man City really did well. And before we even get to the goals, I think we've got to talk about Chris Wood in this game. I mean, 12 goals all season, 1 assist, done a fantastic job up front for Nottingham Forest. And when you play to his strengths, he's an incredibly good striker. But I think he would have gone home on Sunday and he would have been bitterly disappointed that he didn't get at least 1 goal. But two clear-cut chances, two big chances in the game, ones where he probably should have buried it. Oh, do you want to talk us through his chances? Because I don't know. I mean, he has to score them, doesn't he?
Yeah, he really does. Just both, I think, maybe took his eye off the ball at the last second, did not get a clean connection, I think, on either of those really good chances. They were made really, really well by Forest. Perfect passes and pullbacks across to him. Just unlike Chris Wood as well, you expect him. That's what he's best at when he's in and around that sort of 6-yard box, in and around the penalty spot. You just expect him to be clinical and take them. And I think almost every other fan in the country besides Man City fans were rooting for Forest and maybe are a bit annoyed at Chris Wood for not taking those chances when he had them.
Bit presumptuous of you to say everyone's on Arsenal's side. Spurs fans definitely weren't. But yeah.
True.
But yeah, I think despite the fact that they didn't take their chances, Man City absolutely did. And it was maybe a bit fortuitous how they went 1-0 up through Josko Cavallo from the corner, because just before that, Nico Williams ended up having to go off the pitch because of an injury. And maybe he was the man who was meant to be marking Gavardo, as he certainly was on the previous set piece. So maybe that's why Gavardo was able to get a free run on the end of that Kevin De Bruyne corner and find it in the top corner, because it was a bullet header. And I think that second goal for Man City is just classic City. I think Haaland, when he first came to the Premier League, that first game against West Ham, I think we saw that Kevin De Bruyne pass into him in that channel. You cannot give Haaland a striker with that much quality, that much time and space. And he absolutely did. Murillo, who himself had picked up a bit of an injury just prior, decided to soldier on. Maybe it was a bit of a mistake because Haaland had him on touch, sent him the wrong way, and he finished it in the bottom corner. And the robot has now returned, and all looks rosy if you're a Manchester City fan.
Yeah, back on top of the Golden Boot chart as well, one ahead of Cole Palmer, who does have a game in hand over Haaland, so it will be a little bit of a battle between them, but you would probably expect Haaland to bag a few more towards the end of the season, although they've still got that tricky away fixture at Spurs, somewhere where they have really struggled in recent years, and I think that is going to be probably the one fixture that maybe decides this title race. I think when we look at Arsenal's, it seems a little bit more confident that maybe they're going to get at least 7, most likely probably 9 points from their remaining 3 fixtures. Man City will almost definitely win all of their other games. For me, it's just that one Tottenham game, and I will be supporting the white side of North London for that day, which doesn't come around very often, but hopefully, come on, they can stop Man City in their tracks.
Yeah, it'd be such a Spurs thing to do if they lost to Arsenal, but they beat Manchester City and gave Arsenal the Premier League title. But in their defence, they have to go on and try and win as many games as possible. They got to try and hope that Aston Villa do slip up in the remaining games. Maybe that Conference League semi-final or final, if they get to it, will maybe distract them a little bit from the league. And they've got to hope that, they've got to do what's best for them as well. So it's a very tough situation for the Spurs fans to be in. I think for the players, they just got to try and win every single game of football. But I think to end on Nottingham Forest, I think they're having their appeal for the point deduction reviewed this week, and we should get a result from that this week, which is going to be very, very interesting, because I'm glad that whatever happens, hopefully the result of that will happen this week and it won't be after the Premier League season is finished, because I think that's important, because we can't go into a situation where one team is relegated and then maybe another team isn't because they get some points returned. But getting it as soon as possible is ideal, and I think this week is going to be very good. But at the moment it does seem like Nottingham Forest are maybe in the driving seat in that relegation race, because it seems like Luton Town just cannot win a game of football to save their lives, as they went away to Wolverhampton Wanderers and lost 2-1. And I put my money on Luton to stay up in the Premier League this season, but I've got to say, they're definitely not making it easy for themselves, are they?
Not at all. I think in the last few months they have been really, really poor, especially defensively. 6 points from their last 42 available in the league is just not good enough, unfortunately. They still have looked decent at times going forward, driving through midfield, really taking risks, but I think unfortunately that it's just been taking too many risks too often, and it's left them quite exposed at the back at times. When they're playing 5 at the back and those wing backs are flying forward, yes, they still normally do have 3 defenders covering them, but the midfield just like to get forward, and it leaves a lot of space for teams to exploit, and especially teams like Wolves, who have got a number of quick forwards who are really good at carrying the ball, looking at Hwang, looking at Cunha, and that's exactly what happened in this game. Luton were, again, just too open, and as you said, they've got 3 pretty tough fixtures left. They've got Everton, West Ham and Fulham, all sort of looking at decent, solid mid-table sides. And it's just unfortunate they couldn't keep some of that momentum that they had towards the start of the season, where a lot of people were saying, they're looking likely they're going to stay up if they keep playing like this. And I think maybe that sort of dream of Luton and sort of the way everyone has got behind them, given their sort of history in the stadium and the players all seem really likeable, has just sort of faded out and slowly going into a whimper, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I've try to look a little bit into it, because I did think, and I think everyone expected them to pick up a few more points in recent weeks than they have, and they've scored 48 goals this season. That's more than Sheffield United, Burnley, Nottingham Forest, Everton and Crystal Palace, all sides beneath them and a couple of sides above them as well, which is really positive. However, it is the defence, and I didn't quite realise how bad the defence was for Luton Town. They conceded 77 goals this season, which is actually the 10th worst in Premier League history, and Wolves, Burnley and Barnsley have all conceded 82 in a Premier League season, and they're joined 7th, 8th and 9th. So you'd probably say you would expect Luton to concede maybe 6 goals in the remaining 3 games they have. And if they do, they'll be the 7th worst side in the Premier League history in terms of the defence. So they have been competitive, and I think that's been going forward and staying in games, especially in this game against Wolves. They got the goal late on and they managed to have a bit of a fight back. But for the majority of games this season, they have just conceded too many goals and they haven't given their forwards enough of a chance to maybe fight for those games. And I think that's exactly what happened. And like you said, with Wolves, with the likes of Cunha and Hwang, especially when they're fit and available, and if they can have Pedro Neto to that as well, they'll be a frightening threat going forward, especially next season. But I think they let the goals in, and I think both goals were probably avoidable, and they needed to defend better, but they didn't. Wolves took advantage, and Luton gave themselves essentially too much to do.
Yeah, especially in terms of defence, like you said, I knew that I think they conceded the second most goals in the league this season. I didn't realise in terms of history it was that bad, and it seems like this whole season has been an absolute goal fest. It's the highest scoring season, as in on a per game average ever. It's still looking like it's going to be even more goals coming towards the end of the season, and I think a lot of that maybe is as well with the amount of added time that's been happening this season, with sort of looking at 8-9 minutes is a pretty regular occurrence at the end of games, and that's definitely sort of hasn't helped Luton and Sheffield United's defensive records, but has given overall a lot more goals, which I guess for a fan is always a good thing. And especially when you've got really, really good attacking sides in the league like Wolves, especially with Cunha and Hwang, I think they are both just so good. I loved the Hwang goal in this game, and I think it sort of summed up just Cunha and Wolves really, really well. Cunha driving that ball forward, perfectly weighted pass into Hwang, really, really sort of not ridiculously quick feet or ridiculously sort of techie feet, just really smooth, really effective. Shimmies one way, step over, back inside, finishes it really nice, and it's great to see him back starting and fit again. And hopefully Wolves can keep all of those attackers fit next season, because they're just really fun to watch.
Yeah, they absolutely are. And I think Wolves needed that because that's their first win in 7 games. And they've had a lot of injury issues, especially the forward areas have been struggling to score goals as of late. So getting some more players back fit. And like you said, if they can add Neto to that as well, then, for a side who are probably mid-table, to have that front three, that is absolutely frightening. But then Luton absolutely need to be better. And I think Wolves, a good day for them. But the final team in the relegation race is Burnley, and they went away to Manchester United at Old Trafford, and they managed to get a draw. A very end-to-end game this was. I thought this was a lot more entertaining than I thought it was going to be. Burnley gave Man United a very good game, and I'm actually not sure if I should say that Man United gave Burnley a good game, considering with the recent form. But let's start off with Man United, because we'll come on to Burnley in the relegation race. I thought it was very end-to-end, and I thought that Man United were a bit exposed defensively. And in transitions, I think Burnley had a lot of good chances that on another day they probably could have converted. Were you surprised with how open Man United were? Because I certainly was.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I'm surprised, because it seems sometimes that Man United's defence can occasionally be some of the best part of their game. Looking at Maguire, who I think has been really, really good recently. Dallow's had a very good season, and Onana has been pretty solid at times as well, especially in the Prem. And this game, yeah, they just looked really open. I think a lot of it was due to the fact that they really sort of, as you said, it was very end-to-end. They really pushed forward, pushed their midfield pretty high. There was a big gap on both teams in terms of between their midfield and their defence. And I think Burnley tried to counter that. It just seemed like both sides transitioning and countering each other back and forth, back and forth. And Burnley were able to get an XG of over 2 in this game. Onana prevented post-shot an XG of around, I think it was around 1.2, 1.3, so he definitely made a number of saves. See, I'm not sure if I was surprised, because Man United, you just never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair assessment of them so far this season. I think, it could have been more had it not been for the goalkeepers. I think Onana, like you said, prevented that amount of XG, but also he made 6 games in the save. Muric made 9 saves in the game as well. Since he's come in, I know he's had a couple of howlers, but I think for me, he's actually been a much improvement on James Trafford so far this season. And let's talk about the goals, because it wasn't until the 79th minute where Man United took the lead, and it was through Anthony, surprisingly enough, his first goal in the Premier League this season. And it was handed to him a little bit on the silver platter by Sander Berg, playing a ball across the back line to Anthony. And it was a lovely run, lovely finish at the bottom corner. And the player was taking a lot of grief, so probably rightly so as well. But it was nice to see that he did finally get a goal this season in the Premier League. But I think the way that Burnley got back into it, Man United will be incredibly disappointed with the fact that Onana conceded a penalty. And quite funnily enough, it was a bit reminiscent of the very first game of the season for Man United against Wolverhampton Wanderers, where they probably should have got a penalty for a very similar thing. And it's nice to see that the refereeing and VAR have learned from the previous mistakes. because that one was definitely a penalty. Onana just completely takes out Amdouni, and I'm not even sure what Casemiro is doing in the build-up. I don't know why he's trying to head it back to Onana when there are bodies both for Burnley and Man United in the way. I think he's just trying to get that ball clear, but Amdouni was able to get the penalty, convert it, and I think a draw was a very fair result for Burnley. I think that was a good point for Burnley, and I think Man United were probably lucky that Burnley didn't actually score more.
Yeah, really strange game. And I think those two moments both teams will be disappointed with. Burnley disappointed with, as you said, gifting Anthony a golden chance to score, which he did, and they could have gone on and won the game, Burnley. And the same way for Man United. They got that goal, tried to see it out, and it was one mistake again, and let Burnley back into the game. And in terms of Burnley, last week I did say if Burnley can get a point in either of these three games, it was Newcastle, United, and I can't remember their third one, but it's another tough game. If they can get a point in those three games, and they can cross their fingers that Luton and Forest struggle in their remaining games as well. Their last game of the season is Burnley at home to Nottingham Forest. It could be the ultimate escape. It could be. They've just got to hope on the other results, but if they can play like this again against Newcastle, who, same as Man United, okay going forward, but do leave a lot of space to be exploited, Burnley could maybe get another result in that game with a little bit of luck, and as we said, a little bit of luck with the other results. It could come down to the last day of the season, which would be pretty exciting.
Yeah, it'd be pretty exciting if you're a neutral. If you're one of the supporters who supports one of those teams, it'll be nail-biting, it'll be tense, it'll be squeaky bum time, and you will absolutely not want it to go to the last game of the season. And I think, actually, if you look at the run-in for all three teams, Nottingham Forest, Luton and Burnley, I think Burnley probably had the hardest run-in because they've got to play Newcastle United at home next, and then they go away to Tottenham, and they got Nottingham Forest, like you said, in that crucial crunch match at home. And I think for the other two sides, they probably got easier fixtures on paper, but it's still not going to be easy. And we sit here probably looking a little bit foolish because a couple of weeks ago, I said that Luton would stay up. You said Nottingham Forest would stay up. But potentially, it could be Burnley this stay up. And we were saying that maybe the run, if only started a few games earlier, it would have been more beneficial for them. Maybe they had a better chance. But maybe they've timed it to perfection. I don't think so still. Just because they're Newcastle, Tottenham and Nottingham Forest. They're very, very tough fixtures. But I can't see Nottingham Forest getting too many points. And I can't see Luton Town getting too many points. So we could be in a situation where a team stays up in the Premier League without even getting 30 points in the season.
Yeah, I think we said, I think it's going to be around 31, 30, 32, those sort of points that it's going to be enough to keep you up. The big fixture, I think, that may decide how sort of late in the season this goes to is Nottingham Forest v Sheffield United. I think Nottingham Forest should really win that game. Although Sheffield United, they put up a really good fight against Newcastle this week, so you never know. But that's the one I think they need to focus on. If Nottingham Forest can get a win there, they're at least away from Burnley. It should be enough to keep them away from Luton, I think, as well. I don't think Luton will be able to pick up enough points to catch them if they get those 3 points against Sheffield. So I think for me, that's the biggest game that's left on the calendar is Forest-Sheffield.
Yeah, but it'd be such a typical Sheffield United for them to go get relegated and then put in a good performance against the side who needs to get 3 points. But I think just to touch on Luton, I think Everton at home, they could do something. They beat Everton in the reverse fixture at Goodison Park earlier on the season. And then West Ham and Fulham, they're not fighting for anything really. And especially since their last game against Fulham is going to be at home as well. They're in a bit of a poor run, Fulham, as we'll come on to later on. But it's going to be so close. It's going to be so exciting. And at the end of the day, I just think that probably all three of these teams probably don't deserve to be in the Premier League based on the season, how well they've played. But if it wasn't for the point deduction, Nottingham Forest wouldn't be there. But would they even be in this position if it wasn't for the fact they spent the money? Who knows? We could go around in circles about it. But it's going to be exciting no matter what happens. But for two sides who are no longer in the relegation battle as they're now mathematically safe are Everton and Brentford, as Everton beat Brentford 1-0 at Goodison Park. And wasn't the most exciting games that both teams really countered each other out pretty well. And I think the most important thing was for Everton to get the 3 points and to make sure they're safe. And now they can not worry going into next season.
Yeah, very frustrating side to watch Everton at times because I really, really like them. I love the way that they set up. I love the way that they play. I think Dyche, again, similar to Burnley, has done an exceptional job at Everton, has made a system that suits the players he has to an absolute T. They just seem... I just wish they could have played as well as they have in the last couple of games all season because they had the quality to do so. They had a really, really good start, as we were saying. Without their points deduction at the start of the season, they would have been potentially looking at a European place. Mid-season completely dropped down, and in recent weeks, even though in the last 5 games they've kept 4 clean sheets, overall in the league, fifth best defence in terms of goals conceded, and Pickford sitting second in the Golden Glove with 12 clean sheets. They had this five game spell, 4 clean sheets. Bang in the middle is a 6-0 loss to Chelsea. So it's just really, really weird and inconsistent sometimes with Everton. But in this game, I think it was similar. Really solid, really completely nullified Brentford. And that sort of back 5 and defensive unit is something that they need to carry on to next year. And they, I think, should comfortably be mid-table next year if they can keep building, because alongside, sort of, I always say I really enjoy watching Brighton, I really enjoy watching Wolves. Everton is another one of those sides that I really, really enjoy watching. So hopefully next season they can keep it up and press on.
And I think part of the enjoyment from watching Everton comes from the fact that they play differently to everyone else. Everyone else is trying to play this new kind of like Johan Cruyff inspired, Pep Guardiola inspired tiki-taka football. And I just think that it's really nice to see Everton, who are a bit old-fashioned. And when you watch as many games of football as we have so far this season, a lot of teams play in similar ways, but just with slight variations. And I think it's nice to see Everton, who are a bit of a throwback. And do you know what? You mentioned Brighton there. If it wasn't for Everton's 8-point deduction this season, they'd be on 44 points, which is the same amount of points as Brighton and Hove Albion have at the moment, which, when you think about it and compare the seasons that the two sides have had, to say that Everton, without the point deduction, have had the same season as Brighton, I think Everton fans would have absolutely taken that coming into this season, because it would have meant that they wouldn't be in the relegation zone, which they're not, and would have meant they would have had a pretty good season, which I think is fair to say they had, aside from the off-field issues. But for Brentford, ever since that they've been safe from relegation, they've dropped off the ball a little bit. Ivan Toney just out of front for them, but I think he got no change out of Tarkowski and Branthwaite, and I think that centre-back partnership is crucial for Everton going forward. And something to look forward to, I think, is the fact that they've got some really exciting forward players, and they can look forward to a bit of a rebuild, especially with the Ivan Toney money, which they're probably going to get for this summer as he's going to leave the club. And I think they need to recruit a couple more midfielders, forwards, and to be fair, probably across the entire squad, because I think everyone has it's got a little bit still at Brentford, and I think next season is going to be really, really exciting for them.
Yeah, I'm a little bit worried about Brentford because I think they're a fantastic club, and I think they're an asset to the league in terms of how they've built from where they started, have done it so well. They seem so sort of financially solid as well. They've done it very, very sensibly. They've signed fantastically well. This season I have been a bit disappointed, and I am a little bit worried next season. I don't think Toney is going to particularly be a massive loss. I just think they could really do, as you said, with using that money to invest in the squad, because next season, unfortunately for me, they are going to be one that I'm going to be watching on down in that relegation zone. I really do, unless things do change and are refreshed over the summer, which is a bit worrying, because I'd hate to see Brentford go down.
Oh, I don't think they'll be in too much trouble. I think one thing's for sure is you don't doubt Brentford and you don't doubt this Thomas Frank side, because I just think they will always manage to find a way to get things done. And I think like Mbeumo was out injured for a large part of the season. He was also out at AFCON. I think they had the most players at AFCON than any other team in the Premier League. So I think I think there's extenuating circumstances for this season. I think they will be fine. And two sides who will absolutely be fine next season are Fulham and Crystal Palace, as they had a 1-1 draw at Craven Cottage. And two really, really good goals, I thought, in this game. One was a wonder goal by Jeffrey Schlupp, and one was a very well-worked goal by Rodrigo Muniz, who can somehow not stop scoring. I think this is just a game between two sides who are both safe from relegation, and it did have a bit of an end-of-season feel to it.
Yeah, I think this again is it feels like there's so many sides in the league at the moment that we keep saying we're going to be keeping an eye on next season, teams who are going to be pushing up to sort of look at maybe 8th, 9th position as a good aspiration. Looking at Bournemouth, Everton, Wolves, and then both of these teams, Fulham and Palace. And Palace especially, I think since Glasner's come in, I've been really, really impressed with them. I think the system works very, very well for the squad that they have. And I think if they can keep Elise, which I think is probably the least likely of the two to be kept a hold of, they could really, really build something. I think they just need a few signings to strengthen their squad, maybe a couple centre-backs. I think for cover, I don't think they have the best cover there. But with Gahey coming back next season after injury, Adam Wharton, who's come into that midfield and has been really, really impressive, Munoz as well at right wing back, I've been very impressed with. I think they could potentially be building something there at Palace. And again, alongside those other 4 or 5 sides, they're going to be one to keep an eye on. And Fulham as well, a really, really good squad. Another decent season for them as they did last year. We said last year maybe they overperformed a little bit, and maybe that overperformance was potentially exaggerated because this season again at times they've been good and led by that main man, as you said up top.
Yeah, absolutely. His 9th goal of the season so far. I don't think anyone expected him to get 9 goals. And I think, I am really excited about Crystal Palace going forward. I think they're a very young side, and I think they have a chance of keeping at least one of Eze and Elise next season. I think reportedly Crystal Palace have put an £80 million price tag on both of them. I think that'll ward off a lot of teams, but I do think one of them will probably go, just because I think they probably need that money to reinvest in the squad and to reinvest that squad in the way that Glasner wants them to step up. And I think, like you said, Wharton's been absolutely fantastic. Talk about a player who's gone up a division from the Championship and fitted in absolutely seamlessly. I do look at Fulham, and I do think that their recent run of late has filled me with a bit of, maybe a bit of doubt about next season, maybe similar to what you have about Brentford, but just because without Rodrigo Muniz's goal, where would they be in the table? They'd be a lot lower down, and I think the defence hasn't been good in the second half of the season. I think you've also got the news that Adebayo is also going to be off in the summer. He's announced that he's not going to renew his contract. He's going to be off for a free agent. And I do look at that side, and I think they've got a lot of good players. But in terms of going forward, it's Muniz, it's Pereira, it's Willian. But I can also see them as, in my head, as players who have very hot and cold streaks. So I'm not necessarily sure about Fulham. I think they probably will be fine as long as they keep a hold of Marco Silva. And I think that's the most important thing for any team, is to keep a hold of their manager, who are fantastic. And I think already looking at next season, I think it's going to be incredibly competitive.
Yeah, key one for Fulham as well is João Palhinha. I think maybe he's probably going to be leaving in the summer, but I think they can probably get a pretty decent price for him, considering he's one of the best sort of defensive midfielders in the league over the last couple of seasons. I think if they can get a decent price for him and maybe use that to reinvest across the whole squad, they could be okay. And as you've said, that's something I completely discredited with Brentford as well in terms of Thomas Frank and how good of a manager he is. He probably, as just on his own, is able to keep up Brentford no matter what their squad is looking like next year. And I think Marco Silva as well is someone who does very, very well at getting the best out of his players, which is really key, especially for these sides that don't have the massive financial backing that we see in sort of the top 7-8 sides.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is all we have time for on this week's episode. So if you are watching us on YouTube, please give us a like and a subscribe. And if you listen to us on Spotify, please give us 5 stars, answer our questionnaire, and please share with your friends. Join us next week as in the relegation race, Luton host Everton and Nottingham Forest have to go away to Sheffield United. Burnley are at home to Newcastle United. And in the title race, Arsenal are at home to Bournemouth and Manchester City are at home to Wolverhampton Wanderers. And just that little old fixture of Liverpool versus Spurs, which a few weeks ago seemed to have a lot on it, now less so. And join us as we will be here covering all the Premier League football for you from now till the very end of the season and beyond. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you in the next one.